what's up YouTube? This is Dan the Fix-It Man. Got another quick video here for you. I'm going to show you how to change your front brake pads on a 2008 Ford Fusion. The first thing I like to do is push the caliper piston back inside the caliper, which will allow more space for the new brake pads, which are going to be much thicker than these ones that are worn down. The easiest way I found to do that is just grab a screwdriver and put it through this little opening or window in the side of the caliper and just pry that towards you. Basically that's prying against this caliper body here and either the rotor or between the pad and the rotor. You'll see that now that caliper moves freely. We've got a lot more room in there. Okay, now with that caliper piston pushed back in, we just need to remove these two caliper bolts. And those are a 14 millimeter top and bottom, and there's also the slide pin that it goes into is a 17 millimeter, which you may need to hold that in place while you break these loose. Same thing with the bottom one, and you may need a wrench, you may not. A lot of times if these are greased up, they will spin. See, that one's just spinning right there, so we'll just put the wrench on it, hold it in place, and then we can loosen that the rest of the way. Okay, with the caliper bolts off, we can now come over here and slowly lift up the caliper. There's a shim falling out. We can just set the caliper up over here on the rotor, leaning against the control arm. And these shims are just falling out. You can take those out of the way. And then these are little spring clips that push the pads back out. I'll apply pressure so that it's not always rubbing against the rotor. And then we can just pull these pads out. Now before I put the new pads on, I like to put a little bit of grease on the back. This is just this sil-glyde. They've got it at Napa, or I'll put a link in the description. You can buy it on Amazon as well. But I just put a little bit at the ends of the brake pad and a little bit on the back. And you can put a little bit on the metal retaining clips on the caliper bracket here as well, and then we can just put these new pads in place. That's a little tricky here. So on these ones, if you can get the inside started and then just use a screwdriver to pry that retaining clip out just a little bit, there we go, and then that'll push on. Same thing with the other side here. Doesn't take much of this grease. And just make sure you don't get any of this grease on the actual brake pad material itself. And same thing, we can put this one in. I like to start with that inside edge. And then just pry these little retaining clips out just enough that you can fit the pad in there. There we go. Now to put these little springs back in, I like to hold the brake pads together and just push these into these little holes in the ends of the brake pad. Just on the edges right here, you see those holes. So these are pretty easy to put on. They just you want to make sure you use one hand to hold them together. If you let go, they'll just pop off and you'll have to reset the pads. And then while you're holding that, you can carefully bring the caliper down and put that over the pads, and then just pull it up and try to line up the edge here with the slide pins. There's a little metal tab here as well. You want to make sure that you're over that on that little support bracket. And then you just kind of hold it up in place while you get those bolts started. And we can tighten up those bolts with that 14mm. I'm just using a socket wrench, and again you may need to use this 17mm again to hold that slide pin in place. And you're done. Just make sure to torque those bolts to spec and step on the brake pedal once or twice, which will push the piston back out so that the pads are touching the rotor. It's pretty snug here, but you just want to make sure to do that before you drive off. I'll put a link in the description to my website with a couple product links, like to that sil-glyde on Amazon and a few other things as well. But thank you so much for watching, and good luck.